Hi, this is Yvonne Galusha, and in this video we're going to pick up where we left off last time and expand on our manipulation of data using ranges. We are going to add to our repertoire the use of the formula R1C1 property, and then talk about the rows object and the count method. So let's get started. Just to remind you, last time we had this method that we created to basically use to enter additional student data. What I want to do today is talk about what if you want to do mathematical calculations. So let's flip over here to Excel. Traditionally, we may insert a function under formulas, insert function, and do something like average. Find that one. There it is, and we proceed with the dialog box in implementing that. So it automatically assumed we wanted the data above, except we only need to go to B11. A lot of times I just do it myself so I know it's the right data. That's what I want, and so I say OK. And we can see here what happened was an average function got inserted into this cell. Well, we can do this programmatically, and that's what we're going to talk about next using VBA. I'm going to just clear that contents. So, flipping over to our VBA, what we want to do is add another sub. And let's call that average scores, average score. We're just doing one score at a time, right? And let's go ahead and look at some code. So you can see with this line of code, it's very similar to what we did last time. We are finding the end of the data range by doing the end and moving up. Then we're using the offset, going down 2, we would have been in this location, down 2 and over 0, so that means we want the results right there, and we want the value to contain a formula, average. So in essence, this is a string because it's just a value. This is just a property with a value, and we're literally brute force putting in here B2 to B11. So let's just run this and see, we should get the same result, whether we do it manually or programmatically. And we did. But there's some limitations to this, because what if more students are being added? That's not going to work the minute we do this. Plus, what if we want to use this column instead? But first, let's talk about the first problem, dealing with a varying amount of students. Let's take a baby step and talk about this new property, formula R1C1. So instead of value, we are using this formula so that we can substitute row-column indices or representations instead of bluntly putting last time B2 and B11. So recall that minus moves you up or to the left. So in this case, we would be sitting here. So we want the formula to go back to B2. So 13 minus 11 is going to get us at B2. And so that's the desired result. Again, this isn't being flexible yet, but I wanted to first introduce how to use this R1C1 property. So we substituted minus 11, stays in column, the same column, so there's no value there. And then minus 2 says because this is where the data ends. In essence, remember, you're substituting a range inside. You're just using this RC notation to do it. So let's run this version, and we should get the same result. And we do. But now let's see, how can we make this more flexible so we aren't hard coding the exact numbers now that you understand how to use formula R1C1. So in this version of the macro, we created a variable that's going to count the number of students. And we're accomplishing the count by designating the range using the first column. Why did I do that? Because recall that when you're using this end property, if you hit a blank, if a score wasn't available for a student, it would have stopped. Whereas in this data set, we know that there would at least always be a student name. So we're using the A column to accomplish the count for how many rows. So this is just one of the notations we talked about. We're saying starting at A2, that's where the first student name would be, and then going down, see, that designates the end of the range, XL down. So you're going to end up right there with my name, Yvonne. And then this is saying, this is right there, that second parenthesis is the end of the range designation. But now remember, the dot means members of, and ranges, a member of the range object is another object called rows. And then rows has a method count. There's action. So we have, it's like a subset of the range object rows, and then a member of rows count. So this line of code gives us a literal number, and we're storing it in the local variable number of students and students. Now this part is exactly the same. It doesn't matter that this too is hard-coded, because that's just allowing us to get the average with a space in between the data set and then the average. But we're still going to use the formula R1C1. Instead, we are going to substitute the variable contents. That way, the number of students can vary. Now, notice too, I'm introducing this idea of a string concatenation operator, because if you leave the variable inside of a string, then it won't get rendered properly, because instead of the variable name there, we want it to substitute the contents of the variable. Therefore, we have to break the string apart. So this double quote represents one string. It's all the same as what we had before. We say string concatenation. This, by not being within the double quotes, will substitute the count. We have to do +1 in order to allow for that space. Now we want to continue the string, so we concatenate and start the string again, and this is exactly what we had before. Now this looks kind of complicated, but if you break it down, hopefully you should be able to understand what we did. This technique is common as you write VBA code. So let me just summarize. What we are doing is we want to end up with the average formula substituted into that cell as a string. We're just building the string out, but we're using code to do it. So let's go ahead and run this. And it works. So let me just show you how this did build out the exact same thing that we were brute force typing in before. See, it says B2 to B11, and that was the goal. This way, let's say we clear this out, and I didn't do that right. I just want to delete some rows. So we can do that here. Now let's come back. Doesn't matter where we're sitting. And let's run this macro again. And you can see it was flexible this time. It adjusted for fewer students. We check the formula. We can see now it's only using data in rows 2 through 6, which is correct. That's all it should be using. So hopefully this has helped you understand how to build macros that accomplishes tasks. And I want to leave you with a thought. What if you wanted to make this macro even more flexible so that it accomplished an infinite or varying amount of test scores? How would you do that?